I'd just like to welcome everyone to this fabulous session today of the ABMC Research Mini Reviews. And we just have a fabulous group of people presenting to us today and on the panel. But before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Kaurna land. I'd like to acknowledge elders past and present, and I'd like to acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who are on the call today. So today we're going to talk about the Adelaide Health Innovation Partnership, and we have Justin Bilby and Jenny Richter to talk to us, who know a lot about this, who were instrumental in the development. And Justin and Jenny both sit on the SAHMRI board. Justin also sits on the Callan board, and Jenny also sits on the Salin board. And on the panel, we have Steve Rodda from the University of Adelaide, Lesley Dwyer, the CEO of the Royal Adelaide and Callan, and Andrew Zannettino, who is from SAHMRI, from the University of Adelaide, from Callan, and I'm sure he's associated with someone else as well. So fantastic group of people. And I'm going to go straight to Justin to get him to start. Thank you very much, Justin.
Thank you very much, Steve, and welcome. It's a pleasure to be here just to talk about the new Adelaide Health Innovation Partnership recently incorporated with SAHMRI, Callan and the University of Adelaide. What we'll do in the next, Jenny and I will do as a co-chair. I will talk for the first 8 slides, then Jenny will come in behind. Why, what, how, and where we've come from to reach this point. The vision of AHIP is to deliver world-class healthcare to improve the lives of people we serve. Our mission is to plan and establish and execute an innovative and collaborative approach in solving some of the toughest health challenges, and I concentrate on the innovative and collaborative. This has been in almost 2 years in gestation, 18 months in gestation, and the catalyst really was the strong relationship between SAHMRI and the university sector. The new Royal Adelaide Hospital was really to refocus within the precinct. The state government confirmed the new women's and children's would move to the precinct in 2 or 3 years' time. The Australian Bragg Centre for Proton Therapy has been established and is being established. And importantly, and very strategically, the independent governing boards for local health networks have become much greater in their role in research, teaching and clinical practice. The other thing that was obviously the other side of the coin was the declining research grant funding in South Australia and in the precinct. Really the perceived reduction in public policy commitment and the prioritisation of the health and medical research. The loss, crucially, of health and medical research workforce capability in public hospitals. The comment about investment in buildings, e.g. SAHMRI, rather than the research growth and development. And really the lack of a strategic research leadership in a collaborative model. Well, the benefits of the partnership came from the 2 boards, and where we attracted the University of Adelaide. The Callan board had recognised the benefits of its strong research base, needed to grow it and strengthen it, improve patient outcomes, attract and retain more clinical researchers and grow that workforce. Innovation in service delivery, financial benefits and outstanding research impacts are part of the Callan mantra, but it's important now to grow that even beyond that. At the SAHMRI board was 10 years old. It had already had consolidated its relationship with the university sector, and it was now time to take a stronger role in supporting Callan and expanding its research culture, growing its research base and its shared ownership as we move forward into the future. So the benefits of the partnership, I think it's over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Justin. So we started life as a joint research and innovation committee before we came AHIP. And we went through the process of setting up our governance arrangements with Central and SAHMRI's board approval. And we consulted with a whole load of people to make sure we were on the right track. And we even got the opportunity to brief the Minister and the Premier. We developed our terms of reference, we articulated our vision, and then Justin and I, as co-chairs, started the ball rolling. And now progress of AHIP is accountable to Central and SAHMRI boards, and also now the University of Adelaide, a Vice-Chancellor, because the University of Adelaide is now part of AHIP. We had our first meeting on the 15th of February 2021, which is just over a year ago, and it is quite amazing what we've been able to achieve in that period of time, and I'll come to that in a minute. The financial arrangements are, as always with these sort of startups, a little bit wobbly. We've got fantastic support from Paul Flynn from the Hospital Research Foundation, who gave us some seed funding, which enabled us to actually engage a senior project manager to do some of the legwork to help us get going. But into the future, we'll be looking for operational funding from the partners so that AHIP in its small structure can keep going whilst we look to philanthropy and other partner funding for our projects. And I'll describe the projects in a minute. So basically, fundamentally, AHIP is a facilitator. It breaks down any cross-organisational barriers to enable things to actually get done. It can help refine the germ of an idea and provide support as the idea becomes more detailed and confirmed as the direction in which the partners wish to go. AHIP won't own anything. It won't own the project in its final form, and it won't take responsibility for running the project. And it certainly won't duplicate the work of its partners. And one of the exciting things about AHIP is that we have on our committee or executive committee the key leads from each of the partners. And that's really important because that enables decisions to get made really quickly. And we don't lose time due to lack of decision making. We've got a really good working model where we get the idea initially, it goes to an endpoint through strong and robust alignment of the idea to enable detailed planning and project implementation to occur. We've got 5 strategic focus areas and 5 priority projects. Clearly, improving patient outcomes is an essential focus area, which is achieved through collaboration and incorporating research and education into clinical care. The other 4 areas include developing our workforce, streamlining processes, commercialising research findings, and of course, using data to assist the clinical decision-making and research, data being the new oil as far as I'm concerned. The 5 priority projects are listed there for you. The Bragg Comprehensive Cancer Centre aims to accelerate translation of research into care, have strong links to the national cancer research effort, improve equity of access to better diagnosis and treatments across regional and diverse populations, improve the workforce resources available to provide cancer care and training, and develop and promulgate evidence-informed cancer prevention programs. Now, this project is still in its evolutionary phase, and the BCC, which we affectionately call it, is being led by SAHMRI, Central and the University of Adelaide as a very, very strong joint initiative. And in this case, the BTripleC and the working group have links to the Cancer Council SA, just demonstrating that AHIP can spread its wings and include others depending on the project. The clinical trials platform aims to strengthen the relationship between Central and SAHMRI with regards to clinical trials. It has an emphasis on making it easy for community to access trials, establishing a participant database, implementing a quality management system, establishing a research costing tool, and providing support in areas such as biostatistics, access to facilities, training and development, and the all-important e-consent. This project is auspiced by SAHMRI and is being led by Melanie Gentbull, who has brought a wealth of clinical trials knowledge to the project. Our shared service or shared research service project is led by Central and is working towards better coordination between the partners to advance and support emerging and established researchers, making it easy for people to do research. The 4th project is the Centre of Excellence for Aboriginal Health. This is currently led by Dr. Tess Geraghty in conjunction with the Aboriginal Health Equity Unit at SAHMRI. It has a focus on workforce enablers, models of care, and physical environments. Project planning for this project is well progressed, with consultation pathways defined and about to be implemented. The consultation process COVID got in the way of getting this going at the beginning of the year, but it's certainly almost ready to get going. And our last key project is around artificial intelligence and data in health. This is in the very early stages of information gathering, with very strong support from the University of Adelaide for this project. So as you can see, we've got some really meaty projects to keep us going. This slide shows our journey and what we've achieved over the past 18 months. And you'll note there on our journey slide there, the South Australian Productivity Commission of Inquiry into health and medical within South Australia, health and medical research, which occurred during 2020. We believe that the progress that AHIP has made very much supports the recommendations arising from the review. This slide shows the governance structure for AHIP, which is pretty standard. We've got the members, Central, SAHMRI and University of Adelaide Vice-Chancellor, representatives forming the board. We've got an executive group and project working groups. This next slide shows the reporting lines. And just to mention that we have a very small staff of 2, so we're very lean, but very productive. And both of those staff support the executive, the board, and the project working groups. One of your key questions will, of course, be how do we measure our success? And we do have a well-developed business plan. And by the end of 2023, we would expect the following things to be achieved. And I think it's important to note that AHIP is ambitious and we aim high and hopefully we'll have some good successes. So by the end of 2023, we expect an increase in patients participating in clinical trials, together with an increase in research grants across the partners. We hope that every central clinician will have the opportunity to be involved in research and that there will be a single point of entry across the partners for research and clinical trials. And there will be an effective commercialisation pathway built on existing pathways, data-driven clinical decision-making, and secure access to health information to inform clinical practice. So, in conclusion, AHIP has enabled 3 organisations to come together to achieve great things. With an emphasis on partnership and innovation, it is driven by effective leadership, timely decision-making to harness opportunities, and to take collective action. These are the 4 elements that underpin our success now and into the future. So thank you very much for your time, and I shall hand back to Steve and the panel.
Thanks, Justin and Jenny. Fantastic presentation and perfectly on time, by the way. Brilliant. I'm going to start with a few questions while everyone's thinking. And I guess I might go to Lesley first. And the construction of boards for our hospitals in South Australia is relatively new, happened a few years ago. But obviously the board's support for research and for AHIP is critically important. Can you just talk a little bit about whether the board's interest, because some boards might not be interested in research, they might not be interested in a construct like AHIP. What's your board like?
Well, we share some members in common, or we did. And I think in some ways, we were always very careful when the board first was established around some of that separation. And I think in the lead up, and as we were starting to think about how does the precinct work rather than a series of buildings, we were really fortunate. We attracted people to the Carlin board that very much had research almost as part of their DNA. Most had worked in research-driven organisations, academic organisations, but I think what the boards have brought to us that we all have in common is an ambition. The board's, happy place is strategy, and our board very quickly went to strategy being how do we make the most of where we are placed on Adelaide Biomed Precinct, placed within the Adelaide ecosystem for research. And so the boards in some ways have given us both the imprimatur, but also at times I think the cover to be a little bolder in our vision than perhaps what we had been before, but also not to always be looking to somebody else, perhaps centrally, to be setting that direction, but to really, as I say, take our place. And I loved what Jenny and Justin said. There probably had been a bit of a time where I think the term that was used was that the Royal Adelaide in particular was ready to refocus, but it was ready to refocus much more in a partnership to do something that was bigger, that was enduring, because of course what we all brought to the group that became AHIP was absolutely world-class research. We have world-class clinicians, but what we weren't seeing perhaps is how do we accelerate, how do we get that uplift, how do we each make each other stronger? And I know the SAPC was a bit critical about we've invested in buildings, but gosh, I'm so pleased that we've got the buildings that we do and the precinct that we have, because now we can really concentrate on clinical excellence. And this is something that is part of our agenda. This is something that the board expects us to be doing. And not only that, and you can see that by Justin's role. You know, Justin's not there as a board member of SAHMRI, that just happens to add a nice connection. He is there absolutely driving as a driving force for Carlin, but making sure that we not only deliver in partnership, but we see an improvement where we are. So boards have absolutely unleashed the system.
Thank you very much. We've now got a few questions on the Q&A. So even though I had lots of questions, I'll go to the Q&A. And Paul Reynolds has asked, what's the implication for clinical academic appointments? Will the university contribute more to convert title holders to CAs? And on the other hand, will the Callan HSCGB funds be available for university salaries, or those working on collaborative projects? So I guess it's a question about clinician researchers and clinical academics, and I might go to Andrew with this question.
Yes, thanks, Steve. Now, look, I'm happy to take that question. It's a really important question, I think, in real terms. The part of the broader agenda is to see the value of clinical academics and their contribution to the workforce, and creating a culture where, as Lesley indicated, there's a real need and a real desire to actually see that research is fundamental to clinical practice. So the idea of building opportunities for clinical academics within Carlin is certainly on the agenda for consideration. How we go about doing that is going to require some significant change to the way in which we appoint clinical academic staff. And I think there's some work that's underway now looking at the way in which we appoint clinical academics. So I guess broadly, we'd be very keen to look at converting title holders to clinical academics where appropriate, and in leadership roles which serve the needs of both the university and to Central Adelaide. In terms of HSCGB funds, I might handball that over to Lesley, but all I would say is that clearly HSCGB do have a very much a directed approach to the way in which we acquit those funds. They do seek our understanding of where those resources can be best acquitted. So I think that's a discussion to go forward with, but I'll hand over to Lesley. She may have some more insights into that.
I won't spend a lot of time on this, but Andrew's right. It is a fairly narrow spectrum of what we are able to use that money for. However, again, and it goes back to the question Steve asked me, with our board, we are very keen to, I'll call it, reset that relationship and to ensure that it really does drive those strategic imperatives for Carlin, but also for the partnership. So I think that's a short answer of saying, you know, we'll take whatever money we can get. What we have to do is show that it adds value. And that is really all organisations such as HSCGB, but even the Hospital Research Foundation. They want to understand what we're doing, but what's the benefit to our population.
Excellent. Chris Rain has also asked a sort of similar question, talking about the old RAH clinical projects grants. But I guess really what Chris and Paul were getting at was, will there be funds available to sort of help projects? And I guess just to cut that a bit short, obviously the Hospital Research Foundation's been fantastic in giving us some help to get going. And I think, you know, part of what AHIP does is to actually get those funds from other sources and working towards what we want to do. An anonymous attendee has asked about surgery, and I won't read out the whole question, but essentially saying that generally, you know, medical specialties like oncology and cardiology have been more involved in research than surgery. Will we be remedying that in any way? And not sure who to ask that question, so I'll see if someone puts their hand up. Yeah, Justin wants to talk to it. Excellent.
So the important thing is that the current priorities are only the current priorities. what we'll do is we build our AHIP's momentum as we look to other areas to move forward. And some of that question's a very good question. So we're, as an AHIP board and the executive, will look to morph and move into different areas once we get the projects up and running that currently our priorities. As Jenny said, we're a group of two, a team of two, but we are looking to hit information from everybody around the precinct and the area to come in to give us some help with prioritising the next priorities. So that's part of the radar, on the radar as well.
Excellent. Sylvia asks, and I might give this question to Stephen Rodda, as an organ on a chip startup, Omniwell, in Adelaide, how can we engage with AHIP and the biomedical precinct with collaborations for clinicians for cancer treatment or precision medicine? Who should we contact to express interest in clinical collaborations?
Thanks very much, Steve. So I think really echoing some of the points that Jenny and Justin have raised, the AHIP is here to be a facilitator and absolutely a dot joiner. And so for wherever we can help to facilitate those connections, and certainly through into what might be the broader investment community or biotech industry or collaborative network, whether it's in Australia or internationally, it's something that I think I'd love to see that we can actually grow into. Being able to build those bridges of collaboration across the different actors in the play, from fundamental research into clinical practice and translation, is absolutely something which I think is before us, both with the infrastructure that we have in the precinct, but also the goodwill and intent of all the partners around this table. And so where can we go to for that? I think it's an absolute important aspect of driving translation and clinical practice. In terms of where to go to, I guess that would be maybe a question for Justin or Jenny as the key point of contact, if that's Shelley or others.
Jenny.
Perhaps we could ask the person who asked the question to send an email with her contact details to myself and or even to Tamara, who's organised this webinar. That's probably a better, more direct way of doing it. And we'll make sure that we make contact with her just to explore her question a bit further.
And I'm happy to help there however I can.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. Frank Donnelly asks a good question, and this one I think will go to Andrew, because I think Andrew is a good example of someone who does both basic and clinical research. What does the panel see ahead for funding research that may not at first have a clearly defined health outcome, maybe exploratory, or maybe unlikely to ever have a commercial bent? Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That's a really, really important question. I think that's a question that I think it occupies thoughts of many of us here who do research that may not, in its first instance, appear to have a direct outcome to the health or health benefit. And so I think this is a topic where there is considerable thought and lobbying required to federal and state governments to ensure that there is a funding source for this type of non-directed research. That said, I think increasingly there's opportunities for diversifying streams of research funding. And I think this is something that, again, the universities have created opportunities around that in terms of providing some startup support for research projects like that. I'd love to say there was a big pot of money that we could all dip into if we had all great ideas, but again, I don't think we're going to see that in the near term. And again, most of the efforts around funding have been very much linked to a research outcome. I'm not sure if that answers Frank's question, but I'm happy for somebody else to chime in who's more intelligent and better looking.
I think you've done a good job, Andrew. I do think it's almost a topic for a whole half an hour, the sort of exploratory discovery research versus translational health outcome driven research. And Australia needs both. There's no doubt about that. Jenny, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think one of the things that AHIP could do, and it's not on our radar yet, but it could start to explore how can a pot of money be developed between SAHMRI and Central and the university, that emerging and bedside, what I would call bedside research, that doesn't often turn into a commercial venture, can actually be funded so that we can really get quite close to the service delivery end to help develop new practices, etc., that impact on patient care.
Thanks, Jenny. I might go back to Lesley now, and just the BTripleC was listed as the sort of #1 project at the moment. There's 5 projects, but that was clearly a bit of a favourite. Do you want to talk a little bit about the national nature, how the BTripleC could be part of a national network or a federated network, and the discussions you may or may not have had about that?
Thanks, Steve. Look, it is a bit of a favourite, particularly of mine, but also of AHIP. This is really still our aspiration, and we've been asked lots of times, would you do it if there was no money? Well, of course, the answer is yes, because we really believe in this, but we do have a whole range of things that mean that now is the right time. We have a proton beam, the first in the Southern Hemisphere. We have a whole range of things that are happening. But the other thing that is happening in parallel is this national focus and effort on creating national cancer institutes and standards. This is something that's happening in every state, not all jurisdictions. So we would want to do this in partnership with the Northern Territory. But so what's going to be happening over the next probably year is that we will set about creating the Australian standards for comprehensive cancer. As you know, at the moment, really, it is only the Peter Mac that would have that, but plans are well underway for Sydney's Children's Comprehensive Cancer Centre, so they get a quad C, not a triple C. And as I say, both in WA and Queensland, but also ourselves. Part of that is really what I think we've described for AHIP, is how do you bring people together? How do you really make sure that there is a focus on education, training, attraction of key staff, the research that we have, but most of all, the translation. Many of you would know that in the US now for over, I think, 50 years, that there has been the National Cancer Institute. Now, there is a little bit of funding tied to that, but what's more important is the uplift it gives. This is not exclusive just for this site. This is something that we want to do as part of the national effort. Running in parallel with that, so Tim Price and I are leading that work for South Australia as part of the national effort. But in parallel with that, there is also the development of the Australian Cancer Plan. South Australia doesn't currently have a cancer plan. We're working with Ganeshan and others at the network to look at what would we do from South Australia, but having comprehensive cancer and everybody being part of that is really important. So you get the third C because of a centre, but that should not denote a physical space that is exclusive. Certainly we have an aspiration of where we would want to have that physical space, but there's a little bit more water to go under that bridge. But it is great to be part of a collective national effort, which means that our early thinking for the Bragg Comprehensive Cancer was absolutely right on point.
Thanks very much, Lesley. Another question was asked a little while ago, I might have missed it, I think from Des Williams. And to what extent will efforts be made to involve other organisations such as CSIRO, University of South Australia, Flinders University and industry? Would someone like to put their hand up for that question?
Perhaps I'll go, Steve. One of the priorities is to identify the partners for the projects that we want, that are currently our working projects. So the partnerships with CSIRO, the other universities, other partners is very much where AHIP is about. AHIP's not a manager, it's a collaborator. And to go back to that key word of collaboration, it's about using the AHIP structure to come to AHIP and talk through an idea that has ramifications for the three organisations. And the beauty of this is at the executive group, the 3 key executives are there who make the decisions. The board is around partnerships, and it's an efficient model to get to really 3 very powerhouse research organisations. So very much part of the future. And I think my co-chair would agree with me, I think, very much. She's nodding as I'm talking, which is fantastic. So very much so, and we're open to those conversations. And I think that's the key thing. It's one point to come to get the University of Adelaide, Cullen and SAHMRI at the same place at the same time, at the same structure. That's the beauty of what AHIPS has created now.
Thanks very much, Justin. I know Lesley's typing an answer to this question, but Paul has asked, now I've lost, it's gone because you've answered it, Lesley. It's disappeared, sorry. But Paul was asking, is the BTripleC going to be broader than just radiation oncology hematology and medical oncology. So maybe you could answer lung cancer, all those other things, which are obviously critically important.
The answer is absolutely yes, and I'm sorry I didn't realise if I responded I would make the question disappear, so I'm sorry about that. But absolutely, obviously we'll start with some other areas that might be a focus, but that is really what a comprehensive cancer centre does. It brings all of these efforts together. And thank you, Tarek, I've seen your answer too, absolutely.
Yes, and Tarek has also put a question up. The BTripleC sounds extremely promising. Plea to have surgeons involved early in discussion if possible. There is a lot of potential for improving patient outcomes from certain complex cancer conditions that require specific surgical expertise. Absolutely, Tarek, very good comment. We are just a little bit over time, but I thought I might give the final opportunity to Jenny just to sum up. And I know both Justin and Jenny have been really excited about this project, but Justin started, so I'm going to let Jenny end.
Oh, thank you very much, Steve. Well, as I said in my earlier remarks, AHIP is ambitious, and it is ambitious for a reason, because collectively we believe we can actually start to solve some of those really tough health problems that we're trying to address individually. I think in conclusion, I think really the three organisations coming together is very powerful, and it creates something much more powerful than just each individual organisation doing their own thing. So we have great expectations for the next couple of years as AHIP really establishes itself and gets moving. And I'm hoping that in 12 months' time we can come back, Steve, and do another one of these webinars and present the outcome of our endeavours.
Thank you very much, Jenny. And actually, we'll absolutely do that. And I think one of your slides had, you know, where we're going with AHIP, and we should measure that and talk about that with exactly the same panel, because it's been a great panel. And I'd like to thank the panel for giving up their time to come on today, and thank Jenny and Justin for the presentation at the beginning, and just really encourage everyone to think about AHIP and think about how much it can do, how much it can create, and how it can improve health outcomes, particularly on the precinct, but obviously across the state and across the country. So thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, and encourage you to log on again next week. Thank you.